The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 cycles. 7 ancient species sat in the Great Obsidian Chamber, making decisions that shaped the lives of trillions. The Valorans were beings of living crystal, their bodies catching light and breaking it into rainbows. The Marathi floated as clouds of intelligent gas, shifting colors with their moods. The Thuloni breathed water and built cities in the deepest oceans of 100 worlds. 4 other elder species completed the council, each one ancient beyond human understanding. Humanity had arrived 200 years ago. Their ships were slow and clumsy compared to the sleek vessels of the elder races. Their lives were short, barely a century at most, while council species lived for thousands of years. The elders looked at humans and saw children, useful children, perhaps, but children nonetheless. The council granted humanity provisional membership. This was the lowest rank possible. Humans could work. Humans could serve. But humans could not vote. Humans could not own property in the core sectors. Humans could not hold positions of true authority. Commander Yuna stood in the center of the obsidian chamber. She was 43 years old, with black hair turning gray at the temples. She had made this same journey 46 times before. Each time, she asked the same question. Each time, she received the same answer. The Human Coalition formally requests upgraded status, Yuna said. Her voice was calm and steady. We have served the Council faithfully for 2 centuries. We ask only to be recognized as equals. High Arbiter Veleth turned his crystalline head toward her. Light scattered through his body, creating patterns that other Velorans could read like words. To Yuna, he was simply beautiful and cold. Your species lacks the longevity for wisdom, Veleth said. His voice rang like struck glass. You live such brief lives. How can you understand the patience required to govern? Perhaps in another millennium, we will reconsider. Yuna had heard these words before. She had prepared arguments, statistics, evidence of human contributions. But she had learned long ago that the Council did not want to hear these things. They had made their decision before she entered the room. She bowed her head. I understand. High Arbiter. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed against the dark stone floor. What the Council did not see was what happened in the shadows. They did not see Dr. Tejo working 18-hour shifts on the agricultural moon of Villar 7. His research had doubled crop yields across 12 systems. Billions of non-humans ate food grown from his techniques. None of them knew his name. They did not see Engineer Minho crawling through the ancient machinery of the Nexus gates. These gates allowed instant travel between stars. The elder species had inherited them from civilizations long dead. They used them every day but understood almost nothing about how they worked. Minho and 3,000 other human engineers kept them running. They had rewritten code that was older than most Council species. Without them, the network would have collapsed decades ago. They did not see Nurse Soyon holding the hand of a dying Thuloni child in an outer colony hospital. No elder species doctor would work in such distant places. Only humans would go where they were needed, instead of where they were celebrated. That night, Dr. Tejo received a message on his private communicator. It came through channels that the Council did not monitor, channels that humans had built over 2 centuries of quiet work. The message was simple. It contained a set of coordinates, a date, and 3 words. It is time. Tejo read it twice. Then he looked around his laboratory. He had built this place with his own hands. He had made discoveries here that would feed worlds for generations. The Council had never acknowledged any of it. He began packing his research. Across the galaxy, similar messages reached human settlements. On mining stations deep in asteroid fields, on hospital ships drifting between forgotten colonies, on research outposts studying phenomena that elder species found too boring to investigate. No alarm was raised. No angry speeches were made. No protests filled the streets of human colonies. Instead, humans simply began to leave. They did it quietly. They finished their current tasks. They organized their files. They left instructions that anyone could follow. Then they boarded ships and flew toward coordinates that no Council database contained. Commander Yuna returned to Earth, the ancient homeworld that the Council considered a worthless backwater. She stood before the Human Coalition's secret assembly. "They will never change," she said. "We have given them 200 years of service. We have healed their sick, fed their hungry, and maintained the machines they cannot understand. They respond with contempt." She paused. The assembly was silent. "I am tired of asking," Yuna continued. "I am tired of begging for scraps of respect. We will not fight them. We are not warriors, and violence would prove their worst assumptions about us. Instead, we will simply stop. We will leave, and we will let them discover what the galaxy looks like without us." The vote was unanimous. Over the next 30 standard days, 12 billion humans vanished from Council space. They took their ships, their families, and their knowledge. They left behind empty homes, silent laboratories, and abandoned hospitals. On Valar 7, Tejo's greenhouse stood empty. The automated systems continued running, but no one remained to make the small adjustments that kept the crops healthy. In the Nexus Gate control centers, human engineers left detailed manuals. But the manuals assumed a basic understanding that no non-human possessed. The Council noticed nothing. Humans had always been invisible to them, working in the background, solving problems before they became crises. For the first time in 2 centuries, humans had stopped solving problems. The galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The first sign of trouble came 7 days after the last human ship left Council space. The Nexus Gate connecting the Marathi homeworld to the core sectors flickered like a dying candle. For 3 terrible seconds, it went completely dark. Then it sparked back to life, but something was wrong. Ships that passed through arrived at their destinations with damaged navigation systems. Some arrived in the wrong locations entirely. The Marathi High Command sent their best technicians to investigate. These were brilliant beings, clouds of intelligent gas who could process information faster than any computer. They studied the gate's systems for 6 days. They understood nothing. The code that controlled the gate had been modified thousands of times over the past century. Human engineers had patched ancient programs, bridged incompatible systems, and invented new solutions for problems that no one else even recognized. Their work was elegant and effective, but it required human understanding to maintain. The Marathi technicians stared at screens filled with symbols they could not read. They pressed buttons that did nothing. They sent reports to the Council admitting their failure. High Arbiter Veleth dismissed their concerns. "Find the human workers," he ordered. "Bring them back to fix this." His servants searched. They found empty apartments. They found abandoned workstations. They found notes written in human languages, filled with technical terms that no translator could process. They did not find a single human being. 3 weeks after the departure, food shipments to the Velaran crystal farms stopped arriving. The agricultural moons that supplied these shipments had been maintained by human farmers for generations. Valorans could not survive the atmospheric conditions on these moons. Only humans had been willing to live there, growing food in exchange for modest wages and even more modest respect. Now the moons were silent. Crops rotted in the fields. Processing facilities sat idle. The carefully balanced ecosystems that human scientists had created began to collapse without human hands to guide them. Veleth sent investigators to the nearest agricultural moon. They found a ghost town. Houses stood with doors unlocked. Personal belongings sat on shelves, as if their owners had simply stepped out for a moment. But dust was beginning to gather, and the silence was absolute. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no explanation. The investigators searched for 3 days before reporting back. "They are gone, High Arbiter. All of them. We do not know where or why." Veleth's crystalline form flickered with colors that expressed confusion and the first small seeds of worry. "Search the other colonies." Search. They searched. Every human settlement told the same story. Empty buildings. Abandoned equipment. Silence where there had once been the constant noise of human activity. 50 days after the departure, the plague struck Thuloni Prime. It began in the northern oceans, in a city called Deep Haven. A waterborne pathogen, something that had existed in dormant form for centuries, suddenly became active. Thuloni immune systems had never encountered this particular strain. They had no defense against it. For 60 years, a human medical team had maintained the filtration systems that kept such diseases contained. These systems required constant small adjustments, calibrations so subtle that no automated system could perform them. The human doctors had done this work quietly, without recognition, as part of their daily routine. Now those doctors were gone. The filtration systems still ran, but they had drifted out of alignment. The pathogen slipped through barriers that should have stopped it. In Deep Haven, people began to die. The sickness spread fast. Thuloni bodies were not built to fight this enemy. Children died first, their immune systems too weak to resist. Then the elderly. Then everyone. Ambassador Doha was young for a Marathi, barely 400 years old. She had been assigned to the council as a junior diplomatic attaché, a position of little importance. She had never expected to stand before the full assembly and deliver a report that would change everything. But the senior diplomats had no answers. Someone needed to speak the truth. "We have confirmed it," Doha said. Her gaseous form trembled with fear and sorrow. Every human colony, world, every station, every outpost, empty. All 12 billion of them. The council chamber erupted in noise. Crystal voices rang against stone. Gas beings swirled in agitation. Aquatic translators bubbled with confusion. High Arbiter Velith raised one crystalline arm, and silence fell. "Where did they go?" he demanded. "Unknown," Doha answered. "Our fastest scouts have searched every sector we can reach. The human fleet is nowhere to be found. It is as if they simply vanished into the darkness between galaxies." "They cannot have just left," said a Thuloni representative. His voice was thick with grief. 14 million of his people had died in the plague, and the death toll was still rising. Why would they abandon their posts? Without a word, no one had an answer. Velith stood motionless, light moving slowly through his crystalline body. For the first time in his long life, he felt something unfamiliar. It took him several moments to recognize the emotion. It was fear. "Find them," he ordered. "Send messages to every frequency. Offer whatever they want. We need them back." The messages went out. They echoed across the stars, calling for humans to respond. The universe answered with silence. On Thuloni Prime, the death count reached 20 million and continued to climb. In the Nexus network, 3 more gates failed completely. On a dozen agricultural worlds, crops died in fields that no one knew how to tend. The council had spent 2 centuries ignoring humanity. Now, for the first time, they understood what they had lost. And somewhere in the vast darkness beyond council space, 12 billion humans continued their journey toward a new home, listening to the desperate calls of those who had never valued them, and choosing not to answer. The collapse did not happen all at once. It crept forward like a slow disease, killing one system at a time. The Nexus network had connected the galaxy for longer than recorded history. Ships entered one gate and exited another, crossing distances that would take centuries at normal speeds. The elder species had inherited this network from civilizations long dead. They had used it every day for thousands of years. They had never bothered to understand how it actually worked. Human engineers had understood. Over 2 centuries of quiet service, they had become the keepers of knowledge that no one else possessed. They had patched ancient code, replaced failing components, and invented new solutions for problems that had no names. They had done all of this without recognition, without thanks, without hope of advancement. Now they were gone, and their knowledge had gone with them. Gate after gate went dark. Sector after sector lost contact with the core. Trade routes that had operated for millennia simply ceased to exist. Ships that tried to use damaged gates sometimes arrived at their destinations. Sometimes they arrived in empty space, far from any star. Sometimes they never arrived at all. The Valoran economy collapsed first. Their civilization depended on importing raw materials from distant mining colonies. Colonies now cut off by failed gates. Their great crystal cities, beautiful beyond description, began to go dark as power systems failed. For the first time in recorded history, Velaren's knew hunger. High Arbiter Veleth spent his days in emergency sessions, listening to reports of disasters he could not prevent. He had ruled for 3,000 years. He had survived wars, plagues, and political crises that would have destroyed lesser leaders. None of it had prepared him for this. One night, alone in his private chambers, he found something that changed everything. Ambassador Nari had been the last human to serve on the council before the departure. She had held her position for 30 years, quietly advocating for human rights while being quietly ignored. Veleth had spoken to her perhaps a dozen times. He had never bothered to learn her name until it was too late. In her empty quarters, cleaned and abandoned like every other human dwelling, she had left a single data crystal. Veleth found it sitting on her desk, as if she had known he would come looking. He activated it with trembling hands. Nari's image appeared before him. She was small and gray-haired, with tired eyes that held no anger, only a deep and terrible sadness. "High Arbiter," she began. "If you are watching this, then we are gone, and you are beginning to understand why." Veleth said nothing. There was no one to hear him. "You asked us to build," Nari continued. "We built your stations, your colonies, your ships. We invented solutions to problems you did not know existed. You asked us to heal. We staffed your hospitals, cured your diseases, and held your dying children when no one else would. You asked us to serve. We served faithfully for 200 years, asking only one thing in return." She paused. Her image flickered slightly. "We asked to be seen as equals. You refused. Again and again, cycle after cycle, we asked, and you refused. You told us we were too young, too primitive, too short-lived to deserve respect. You took everything we gave and offered nothing but contempt." Veleth felt something crack inside his crystalline chest. It was not a physical sensation. It was something deeper. "So we have decided to stop asking," Nari said. "We harbor no anger toward you. We wish you no harm. We simply realized a truth that took us too long to see. You will never change until you understand what you have lost. We cannot teach you this lesson with words. We can only teach you with absence." Her image looked directly at the recording device, directly at Veleth. "Good luck, High Arbiter. You will need it." The recording ended. The room fell silent. Veleth stood motionless for a long time. Light moved through his body in patterns that no other Velaran had ever seen. Patterns of grief, shame, and devastating regret. Far from council space, beyond the reach of failing gates and dying civilizations, Captain Jisoo guided her ship through unknown stars. She was 51 years old, with strong hands and steady eyes. She had spent her whole life hauling cargo through council space, dealing with customs officials who looked at her like she was something unpleasant, stuck to their shoes. She had swallowed insults and accepted unfair fees, and smiled through gritted teeth, because that was what humans did to survive. She was not smiling now. She was not swallowing anything. Behind her ship, a fleet of 12,000 vessels carried humanity toward their new home. They had found a cluster of worlds far beyond council, reach worlds with clean water, breathable air, and no one to tell them they were inferior. Her first officer, Hyun, stood beside her on the bridge. He was younger than her, but his hair was already going gray from stress. The journey had not been easy. They had left behind everything they knew. "Any regrets?" Hyun asked quietly. Jisoo watched the stars stream past the view screen. Each one was a sun, possibly with planets, possibly with life. The universe was vast beyond understanding, and humanity was finally free to explore it. "Ask me in 100 years, she said. Hyun nodded slowly. "Do you think they'll survive?" "The council, I mean." Jisoo considered the question. She thought about Veleth, with his beautiful crystal body and his ancient arrogance. She thought about all the times she had been ignored, insulted, dismissed. "Some of them," she said finally. "The ones who learned to do things for themselves. The ones who were kind to us, even when kindness was not required." She paused. The rest will learn what it means to need someone who is not there. Behind them, 12 billion humans flew toward a future they would build with their own hands. Ahead of them, the stars waited with infinite patience, and in the council chambers far behind, the silence grew louder every day. 50 cycles had passed since the humans left. 50 cycles of darkness, 50 cycles of death, 50 cycles of learning. Too late. What it meant to be alone. The Valoran homeworld had lost contact with 3 of its 7 colony systems. The nexus gates connecting them had failed completely, and no one remained who knew how to repair them. Those colonies might still exist somewhere in the darkness. They might have survived. They might have starved. No one knew, and no one would ever know. High Arbiter Valeth had died in the 32nd cycle, not from violence or illness, but from something the Valorans called dimming, a slow fading of light that came when a crystal being lost the will to continue. His last words had been a name: Nari. He had spoken it like a prayer for forgiveness that would never come. The Marathi collective had torn itself apart. Without reliable trade routes, the 17 habitable gas zones where they lived had become isolated nations, each fighting the others for resources. Wars that would have been unthinkable 50 cycles ago now burned across 3 sectors. Millions had died. Millions more would follow. The Thuloni had retreated into the deepest parts of their oceans. Their atmospheric processors, maintained by human engineers for generations, had finally failed. The surface of their world was now poisonous to them. They lived like refugees in their own seas, crowded into ancient deep-water cities that were never meant to hold so many. Ambassador Doha had grown old. She was no longer the young diplomatic attaché who had delivered terrible news to an uncomprehending council. 700 years of life had passed, and the last 500 had been filled with nothing but loss. Her gaseous form was thin and pale now, barely visible in certain lights. She moved slowly, and she rarely spoke, but she still believed. She had been one of the few council members who had treated humans with respect. She had learned their names, asked about their families, remembered their faces. She had done this not because she expected anything in return, but because it seemed like the right thing to do. Now, on a dying station at the edge of known space, she prepared to make one final attempt. The station was called Last Light. It had been a trading post once, busy with ships from a dozen species. Now it was nearly empty, its corridors cold, its systems failing one by one. A small group of survivors from various species had gathered here, refugees from collapsed civilizations, seeking some kind of hope. Doha floated before the station's communication array. It was old technology, barely functional, but it could still broadcast a signal into the void. She did not know if any humans would hear. She did not know if they would care. But she had to try. "If any human hears this message," she began, her voice weak but clear, "please listen. My name is Doha. I served on the council for 300 years. I watched my people treat you with contempt. I did not speak loudly enough against it. For this, I am sorry." She paused, gathering strength. "I understand now. We understand. We were arrogant. We were cruel. We took everything you gave and offered nothing but contempt in return. We believed our long lives made us wise, but wisdom is not measured in years. It is measured in how we treat those who cannot fight back against us." Tears did not exist for Marathi, but something in Doha's form flickered with colors that meant the same thing. "We do not deserve your help," she continued. "We know this. The council made its choices, and we are suffering the results of those choices. This is justice." She floated closer to the transmitter. "But billions of innocents are dying. Children who never voted against you. Species who never sat on the council. People who would have welcomed you as friends if they had ever been given the chance. They are starving. They are sick. They are afraid." Her voice broke. "Please. I am not asking you to save the council. I am asking you to save the people. The council failed both you and us. Please respond. Please." She ended the transmission. The signal flew outward into the darkness, growing weaker with every passing second, spreading across light years of empty space. Doha waited. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Nothing. On the 5th day, the survivors on Last Light began preparing for the end. Food supplies were running low. The power generators would fail within a month. There was nowhere left to run. Doha floated alone in the observation deck, watching the stars. She had done everything she could. It had not been enough. Then the communication array crackled to life. The message was brief. It contained a set of coordinates, a date, and one line of text. Send one representative, unarmed, alone. We will listen. Doha stared at the words for a long time. Then she began to weep in the only way her kind could, shifting through colors of grief and hope and desperate, fragile joy. Somewhere, in the vast darkness beyond the dying galaxy, someone had heard. The young Valoran who had inherited Valeth's title was named Theron. He was barely 1,000 years old, practically an infant by Valoran standards. He had grown up during the Long Dark, watching his civilization crumble around him. He had never known the arrogance of the old council. He knew only loss. When Doha's message reached him, he did not hesitate. I will go, he said. It could be a trap, warned his advisors. They could kill you. Theron's crystalline form glowed softly. Then I will die trying to save my people. That is a better death than watching them starve. He boarded a small ship, the last functioning vessel in his fleet, and flew alone into the unknown. The coordinates led him to a region of space that council records had always marked as empty. But as his ship drew closer, he began to see lights. Thousands of lights. Millions of lights. A civilization hidden in the darkness, waiting. Humanity had not merely survived. Humanity had thrived. And now, finally, they were ready to talk. The human colony world was called New Dawn. Theron had never seen anything like it. His ship descended through clouds that glowed pink and gold with the light of twin suns. Below him, a world stretched out in endless green and blue. Cities rose from forests, their buildings designed to look like living things, towers that curved like trees, bridges that flowed like rivers. Technology and nature had merged into something beautiful, beyond words. But what shocked Theron most were the people. He saw humans, of course millions of them, living and working and laughing in the streets below. But he also saw others. Children of a dozen species ran through parks that stretched to the horizon. Young Marathi floating beside human friends, Thuloni swimming in artificial lakes, even a few Velarans whose crystals caught the sunlight and scattered rainbows across the grass. Refugees, Theron realized. People, the humans, had rescued during their departure. People the council had abandoned. Humans had saved them. Humans had given them a home. A shuttle arrived to bring the Wren to the surface. The pilot was a young human woman named Unbi. She had bright eyes and an easy smile, and she treated Theron with a kindness he had not expected. First time visiting New Dawn? She asked. First time visiting anywhere like this, Theron admitted. Unbi laughed. It wasn't always so pretty. 50 years ago, this whole continent was bare rock. We built everything you see from nothing. Wren looked at the gleaming cities below. In 50 years, humans work fast when we care about something. Unbi guided the shuttle toward a landing pad surrounded by flowering gardens. The Admiral is waiting for you. Admiral Yuna was not what the Wren had expected. He had imagined someone fierce and angry, hardened by 2 centuries of mistreatment. Instead, he found a small woman in simple clothes, sitting on a stone bench in a garden filled with flowers. She was old now. Nearly 100 years had passed since she stood before the council asking for equality. Her hair was white, her face lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and clear. She did not stand when the Wren approached. She simply watched him, her expression calm. You came, she said. Theron stopped a respectful distance away. His crystalline form dimmed slightly, a sign of humility among his people. Billions are dying, he said. We have no right to ask for your help. But I am asking. Yuna studied him for a long moment. Behind her, children played in the gardens, human children laughing alongside refugees from a dozen broken worlds. Why should we return? She asked. So you can treat us as servants again once the crisis passes? No. Theron dimmed completely. the deepest sign of Valoran submission. His body went nearly dark, light flickering only faintly in his core. I have been authorized to offer humanity full elder status. Permanent council seats. Reparations to every human family that suffered under the old laws. A formal apology broadcast to every surviving world. Words, Yuna said quietly. The council has always been good at words. Theron was silent for a moment. Then, he made a decision, the hardest decision of his young life. Then let me offer something else, he said. Let me stay. Here. On New Dawn. As a hostage. A guarantee. If my people break their word, if they return to their old ways, you will have the High Arbiter's heir to judge as you see fit. Yuna raised an eyebrow. You would give up your freedom? Your position? Everything? I would give up everything to save my people, Theron said simply. Is that not what humans did for 200 years? You gave everything. You asked only for respect. We should have given it freely. The garden was quiet. Wind moved through the flowers, carrying the scent of growing things. Finally, Yuna smiled. It was a sad expression, weighted with memories of pain and loss, and long years of patient hope. We never wanted power over you, she said. We just wanted to matter. She stood slowly, her old bones protesting. Then she extended her hand toward Theron. He did not understand the gesture. Velerans did not shake hands. But he reached out anyway, letting her small, warm fingers close around his cool crystal ones. Go home, Yuna said. Tell your council we are coming. Not as servants. Not as rulers. As partners. Equal partners. She held his hand firmly. And if anyone forgets what that word means, if anyone tries to return to the old ways, we will simply leave again. Her eyes met his. And next time, we will not come back. Theron nodded slowly. I understand. I hope you do. Yuna released his hand. I hope you truly do. The reconstruction took centuries. It was slow, difficult work, complicated by old grudges and deep wounds that would not heal quickly. But it happened. Human engineers rebuilt the Nexus network, teaching their methods to students from every species. Human doctors traveled to plague-ravaged worlds, training local healers and establishing hospitals that would serve all people equally. Human diplomats mediated conflicts that had festered for generations, bringing peace to sectors that had known only war. But things were different now. In every council chamber, a human voice carried equal weight. On every station and colony, human workers received the same honors as elder species. Laws were changed, traditions were broken. A galaxy that had been built on hierarchy learned, slowly, to value equality instead. Theron kept his promise. He stayed on New Dawn for 30 years, living among humans, learning their ways. When he finally returned to Valoran space, he carried their wisdom with him. He became High Arbiter, the first leader of his people who had been taught by humans instead of teaching them. And in the archives of New Dawn, a simple monument stood in the garden where Yuna had received him. It was a statue of a woman bowing before an empty throne, a reminder of the day humanity stopped asking for respect and finally received it. Below the statue, words were carved in a dozen languages. We did not defeat the council with weapons or words. We simply showed them the shape of the universe without us. Admiral Yuna did not live to see the full reconstruction. She died at the age of 103, surrounded by children and grandchildren, on a world she had helped build from nothing. But her legacy endured. Centuries later, historians would call the human departure the most important event in galactic history. They would study it, debate it, write endless books about its causes and effects. But the lesson was simple, and it could be spoken in a single sentence. Everyone matters. Everyone deserves respect. And those who forget this truth will learn it, sooner or later, in silence and in sorrow. The humans had taught this lesson without anger, without violence, without a single harsh word. They had taught it simply by leaving, and the galaxy had finally learned.